40 Years On project is a 3-year oral history, archive and theatre project. We're Heritage Lottery funded and also some Arts Council funding. We're based here at Central Library in Peterborough, and we're focused around the work of the Peterborough Development Corporation. So we are, as part of that work, we're cataloguing over 450 boxes of the Peterborough Development Corporation materials. We're also building an oral history archive of at least 150 interviews. That includes ex-PDC employees, long-term residents and new residents that moved into the area. And we're also going to be creating some theatre out of the materials. So we're going to be doing a documentary play and a community play as part of that.
The corporation's records, after the corporation was shut down, languished in a warehouse for a long period of time, somewhere out in the Ortons, and there's a real risk that they were going to vanish forever. But the corporation had a massive amount of power, and almost everything that it did we're still living with as part of the legacy of Peterborough today. And so for a lot of people who live in Peterborough, the history of their local area, the history of their house, the history of their neighbourhood is all bound up, all a part and parcel of the work of the Development Corporation. So if we can catalogue those records, then we can allow loads of local people to be able to start to learn more about their local area and work out where they've come from. The archive, I say to many people, is like Peterborough but in a box. So it contains everything that you'd expect from the city. So we've got all of the minutes of the meetings that took place. We've got letters from people in favour of development. We've got letters from people opposed to development. We've got the architect's plans. We've got all of the contracts that they signed with all the individual developers who came along to build different bits of the city. We've got a wonderful photographic archive. So it's huge in its breadth. It covers every aspect of the PDC's work. I'm not sure I'd be able to pick a highlight, really. But in many ways, that's the beauty of it. There's so much rich detail in there, so many stories just waiting to be discovered by researchers in the future.
Yes, the volunteers are actually involved in the three major roles of that process, which includes the repackaging of the material, then the listing and describing of the contents, and then actually inputting that onto the catalogue, which will eventually become the online catalogue.
We started helping out with packaging of all the archive material from the Development Corporation, and now we're cataloguing to make sure that if people use these files, then bits of paper won't go missing or go astray.
Yes, it's been very enjoyable in some of the letters that they wrote to the Development Corporation and vice versa to the Department of Environment, and how involved and complicated it was.
The most enjoyable thing has been the team that I'm working with. They're all lovely people, they've got lovely interesting things to say, and I look forward to coming every week. The work's rather mundane actually, but we've read some fascinating stuff of history and we've all made friends, and that's been great.
I think oral history is a really important part of this project because the expansion period affected so many people. There are the long-term residents that were already here, and you know, their villages were being developed around, and that affected sort of their way of life, but it also gave them greater opportunities. There were more employers coming in, the shopping centres were changing, there was more housing available, but that also brought in a massive increase in residents. There were around 60,000 new arrivals to Peterborough during that time, and so it's quite important that we talk to them and find out why they came here, what their experiences were, and make sure that those are archived for in the future, because I think that that's an important part of Peterborough's history. Volunteers are really an important part of our oral history element because they are involved in everything. Essentially, we have a team of oral history interviewers, and they have been trained, and they are the ones that are going out and talking to residents. Volunteers and local residents are the best people to do these interviews because they have local knowledge, they're interested and passionate about, you know, what we're trying to explore. and then each interview is different because each interviewer is different, so it makes it a very interesting way to conduct the oral history. And then we have volunteers to assist us with the transcription, the proofreading of all of those oral history interviews, and without the volunteers we wouldn't be able to do that.
I really enjoy the role because of all the amazing stories I get to read. It's really interesting to hear about people who came to the city 40 years ago and how the city has changed over those decades.
Well, I worked here in the library for work experience, and part of my roles and work experience was to work and volunteer in the 40 Years On project. And I love the atmosphere in here, and I also love the project.
It's really rewarding to be able to put something towards this cultural aspect of Peterborough and this cultural project.
I found it really interesting listening to people's life stories.
Helping others to learn more about it.
And how Peterborough has changed over time, and I got really interested in it.
It's definitely good experience to have this kind of audio typing relationship.
I think I've developed my skills in transcription.
Listening to something and then correcting it.
I've learnt the history of Peterborough, which is really interesting because I've only known like the old history of Peterborough, and this is more the modern history, which gets overlooked sometimes, and I think it shouldn't be.